The reading. Welcome, everyone. I'm Meg Carney, the founding director of the Solstice Master Fine Arts and Creative Writing program here at LaSalle University. Welcome to the last in a series of 8 evening readings taking place as part of our summer residency launch of our fall 2024 semester. As we open this physical and virtual space, I'd like to note that we acknowledge that the territory on which LaSalle University stands is that of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts people. LaSalle's campus is a place to honor and respect the history and continued efforts of the Native and Indigenous community leaders who make up Eastern Massachusetts and the surrounding region. The statement is one small step in acknowledging the history that brought us to reside on this land and to help us seek understanding of our place within that history. And now for tonight's reading. First up, we will have comics and graphic narratives faculty member Josh Neufeld, who will be introduced by soon-to-be graduate of our program, comics and graphic narrative student Corey Knight. Then we will have young adult fiction guest Audie Rule, who will be introduced by alum Lisa Sullivan. And we will conclude with Laura Williams McCaffrey, who teaches fiction for adults and for young adults here at the Solstice program. And she will be introduced by young adult fiction student Sister Allison Goliath. Corey, come on up.
And now, a man who needs no introduction. Yeah, I had to just for the look on Meg's face. 2 years ago, I was also up here in this very spot introducing Josh for the first time. And I told him afterwards that bit was what I had initially planned to do. And he said, oh my God, you should have done that. So 2 years in the making. What can you say about a mentor you've worked with almost exclusively for 2 years straight? When I got here, I couldn't art my way out of a paper bag. It was objectively bad. And my first couple of days at Solstice, I was terrified. I had no idea what I was doing here. The imposter syndrome was real. And I'm sitting there in the readings at the back of the room thinking, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And I'm drawing because this is the only thing that's keeping me from running screaming into the night. And at the end of the reading, a faculty member who shall remain nameless comes up to me and goes, were you drawing during reading? And she points to Josh and goes, do you know what your student was just doing? And she goes, he was doing the same thing. And that's when I figured out I was probably going to be okay. Josh Neufeld is wonderfully accomplished, a comics journalist, I would say, of the highest caliber, and yes, still better than Joe Sacco. Just saying. Awards and recognitions and nominations and shortlists like crazy. Awards are one thing, heart is another. And I can say in 2 years, Josh has the heart for teaching. He teaches beyond just Solstice, but he has the patience and the caring and just the dedication to pull things along. Sometimes kicking and screaming. I am no easy student, but it is with patience and determination that he has gotten me to where I am, and just the joy he has for Solstice and this program. The awards are fantastic, but the person himself is even better. Josh Neufeld.
Thank you. I'm humbled as ever and Corey, we did it together.
Yeah.
You made me a better teacher. Just sharing my screen if I can. Should be ready on my end. Okay. There we go. Sorry, I'm blocking it for you guys. Usually I share a work of comics journalism that I've done of late, but this time I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, flip the script, and share a couple of short, more memoir type pieces. Or by memoir, I mean little short comics where I make fun of myself. Yeah, I'll just jump right into it. I think there was something else I was supposed to say. It'll come to me. All right, this first one is the Josh Neufeld name story. Some of you may be familiar with this. I might have given a similar workshop or craft class where I had people do their own name stories. This is something that was originally inspired by a wonderful comic by Harvey Pekar called The Harvey Pekar Name Story, illustrated by Robert Crumb. And that's the first line of the first panel. My name has been a matter of some concern to me over the years. You may also know Harvey Pekar from the movie American Splendor with Paul Giamatti from about 20 years ago. Great movie, still highly worth checking out, where he also does a version of this monologue. But I figured if I've given this as a prompt for my students all these years, I have to do my own version of it. So this is the Josh Neufeld name story. And I like to show you sort of what the full comic looks like. So you can see sort of the panel to panel continuity, just to remember that that's a feature of comics. So important. This is using the democratic grid, as we learned about yesterday in Gerald Dye's class. But I'm gonna zoom in on these panels, make it a little easier for folks to read and for you to see the drawings and stuff. So here we go, the Josh Neufeld name story. My name has been a matter of some concern to me over the years. Josh Neufeld. Nowadays, it seems like every other celebrity or professional athlete is named Josh. But that wasn't the case when I was growing up, and where I did, Southern California in the 1970s, my name set me apart. My name was so exotic, it seemed like nobody could ever remember it, not even my teachers. Jonah, Jason, Josiah, Jordan, James, Jesse, Jeremiah, Jehoshaphat, Jonathan, Jasper. Worse, it screamed out that I was Jewish. I wanted to be named something normal, like Brad or Derek. Plus, when the movie Star Wars came out, my friends found all new ways to make fun of my name. Jawa. Utini. That's what Jawas say. In response, I went through a phase where I made my mom call me Superboy. I wouldn't respond at all unless she used the right name. Joshua, Superboy, come to dinner. As I got older, I grew to like my name. It's got a good rhythm to it, Josh Neufeld. And in case you were wondering, I'm proud to be Jewish, even though I'm not religious, but there's still one thing that bothers me. If you switch the first letters of my name, you get Nosh Jufeld. I continue to be concerned. All right, so this next piece, I really wish I could get rid of this thing. Hide video panel. There we go. All right, father figures. So this piece, the most important thing to remember about this is I did it shortly after I became a dad. And I hope my dad is not watching right now. And this is another shot of the full thing, one of the pages at least, just to remind you again that it's a comic and the gutter, the spaces between the panels, very important. Also, it's cool to note that my actual dad does show up in this comic every third panel or so. He is a returning figure. As I was growing up, basically raised by my single mom, a lot of men passed through my life, father figures. Age 2, dad takes off. I just don't think I'm cut out to be a father, you know. Age 3, unclear on the concept. Dada? True story according to my mom. Age 4 and 5, Ruben, a doctor who liked my mom and my drawings. Age 6, dad, back for a visit. Scared the cat. Hello, I'm your father. Age 7, Daniel. He jumped our car battery for us, asked for my mom's number, which I yelled out. My mom wasn't too thrilled, but he took us out to a nice meal. Ages 7 through 11, Alan argued about Marx with my mom over dinner. Age 8, dad with wife number 2, took me in for a year, bought me comics, removed a splinter, took me to see Blazing Saddles. Ages 9 through 11, Austin and Paul, housemates, took me to the beach, played pranks, treated me like their little brother. I see, said the blind man. I love that one. Ages 9 through 11, Bill, our other housemate, tapped his cereal down below the milk, used ketchup and mayo to make smiley faces on his hamburger patties. Ages 9 to 13, for a month each summer, my dad fed me steak and chicken, taught me to play baseball. That's it, keep your eye on the ball. Ages 11 through 13, Bob took me to Candlestick Park, championed Little League, barber haircuts, Adidas sneakers. Age 13, Michael, a grad student who hung around for a while. Ages 14 through 17, dad with wife number 3. Took me in, oh, and a new baby. Took me in for high school. Ages 14 through 20, Hawkeye. Cracked wise, yet able to cry. Loved and respected women. My kidneys were expecting orange juice. Silly kidneys. That was me doing Hawkeye doing Groucho Marx. 14 to 21, John came with a dog and a country house. Taught me to play squash. That's it, keep your eye on the ball. Age 40, Josh. Dad to the 5th, divided by wives squared, plus mom divided by boyfriends to the 7th, times dog plus housemates to the 3rd, divided by baseball plus comics, times celery plus steak, times Blazing Saddles plus MASH equals me. She's 17 years old now. Okay, another piece called Weird. I Thought I Liked Teen Titans Better. This one is a rerun. I think I read this the very first residency I was here, but nobody except some faculty members might remember it. When I was a teenager, I kept lists, statistics, and charts about my favorite things: friends, baseball, comics, movies, TV shows, and music. Let's see, 608 divided by 7. Okay, carry the 4. I divided the people I knew into categories, alphabetized and cross-listed by status. Good friend, friend, neutral, enemy. My closest friends were kept track of on individual index cards. kept track of. This one's for Peter. Where is he? Yeah. I followed my favorite baseball player's progress by doing weekly projections about his stats based on a full season. I graded each week's comics on a scale of 1 to 5, totaling and averaging the results. Blue Devil isn't what it used to be. This issue's only a 3. I kept lists of which books I had read, which movies I had seen, and with whom, and how many times. So now I've seen Wrath of Khan twice with you, once with Phil, and once solo. By the way, do you see the guy in the foreground wearing the Michael Jackson Thriller jacket? I just don't want you to miss that. I just saw that. I went through my record collection and I graded each song on a scale of 1 to 5. Then I took the total and divided it by the number of songs to achieve a true average. Then I ranked all my favorite albums. At age 17, I had seen the Star Wars movies a total of 22 times. There were only 3 Star Wars movies at that point. Yes, my master. My preferred TV show was Hill Street Blues, but look at what my second favorite show was. And don't forget Foul Ups, Bleeps, and Blunders. Who even remembers that one? Okay, moving on. My favorite comic was Thor. Thor 4.75, Teen Titans 4.67. Weird, I thought I liked Teen Titans better. Apparently not. The numbers don't lie. And my all-time album was Prince's Purple Rain. Still my all-time album. R.I.P. All right, last piece. So this is Josh and I. This was done for an anthology where all the cartoonists in the book were encouraged, or actually mandated, to draw a comic using their non-dominant hand. So everyone had to draw with the other hand. And I was really interested in getting involved with this because I had always been fascinated by stories of artists who were ambidextrous and who had like one style with their left hand and a totally different style with their right hand. And it just was a fascinating idea to me and really scary because I already feel less than confident with my dominant hand, and the idea of going out there and drawing with my other hand was really intimidating. But I did it, and I did it from my little entree into the story was to write it from the perspective of the person in the mirror. So the storyteller here is me in the mirror. That's why the comic is by Hasaj. Josh and I. I'm kind of self-conscious about being right-handed. They say left-handers are the real creative ones because they draw from the right side of their brain. Every day I sit down to work, I see this other me, mimicking my every move, drawing with the other hand. And when he shows me what he's done, it looks odd, slightly askew. I think he's dyslexic. Who is this other cartoonist? Maybe he struggles like me over each line, thinking, planning, doing it over and over again until he gets it right. Probably not. I bet it's easy for him, the art just flowing from his pen in a spontaneous burst of inspiration. I ask him what he knows, but he doesn't answer. Hello? Hello? Instead, he just repeats the question. Thank you.
I just want to start by saying that other people here went to Audie's class today, Visual Cues in the Kidlit novel. It was different from anything I've ever taken. It fresh, fun, really incredible, and I think it's going to make a difference in my work. So I thank you for that. Addie Rule lives in the Granite State with 2.5 warring cats, a macaw, a magician, and a small but mighty flock of chickens. I lifted that from her website because it made me weirdly jealous. She is the author of 5 novels through the publishers Scholastic, St. Martin's, and Andrew McNeil, including her debut YA Gothic romance, Strange Sweet Song, which won the 2016 New Hampshire Writers Project Literary Award for Outstanding Young Adult Book, and the Vermont College of Fine Arts Houghton Mifflin Clarion Prize, the YA fantasy The Hidden Twin, the middle grade fantasy adventure Hearts of Ice, the YA psychological thriller Why Would I Lie, and last year's middle grade supernatural mystery Nell and the Nether Beast, illustrated by Ash Zemanek. The girl's been busy. Addie also writes essays, short stories, and plays, which have appeared in Hunger Mountain Review, New Hampshire Pulp Fiction Anthologies, New Hampshire Magazine, and elsewhere. As if that wasn't enough, she leads workshops throughout New England and offers editing services with her writer mom at Just Two Rules Editing Services. Addie is a former junior high school teacher who earned her undergraduate degree in voice and an MFA in writing from the Vermont College of Fine Arts. She has performed in the theater and opera and was a soloist for the Tanglewood Festival Chorus, which is the chorus of the Boston Symphony Orchestra and the Boston Pops. This experience surely played a role in the success of her novel, Strange Sweet Song, which features a teen soprano protagonist who is so well-wrought and a setting that is so lush and uncanny. I felt like I too had enrolled in the mysterious Dunhammond Conservatory. Seriously, you must read it for yourself. Let's give a warm welcome to the left-handed, non-bike riding, unpierced-eared, Garfield collecting, cavity-less animal rescue volunteer who loves cats, even the scraggly, bitey ones. The amazing Addie Rule.
Oh my goodness, thank you, Lisa, so much. Thank you. Is this good? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for that introduction. And thank you all for having me. I've had such a fun day. This is such a wonderful program and I love the vibes here. The talent show was amazing. It blew me away. Thank you to Temple and Sister Allison for taking care of me and showing me where things are and being so nice. And I think there was a pillow fairy that delivered a pillow outside. It was Thank you. Thank you, Meg, and thanks to Quentin. I wish I could have met him in real life today. I'm going to read tonight from Strange Sweet Song, which is the story of a 17-year-old girl who's attending a prestigious music academy. But it also, there are 3 storylines that kind of go through the novel and converge. And I'm going to read 3 short chapters from one of the other storylines. So it's the introduction of this character, who's basically a magical cat from space who kills people. I will let you know there is some violence in this. There is some animal death. And because I am that person, I don't care. I'm going to give you the spoiler that the wolves get resurrected at the end. So They come back, just so you know. And if you don't have Does the Dog Die on your phone, it's an app. You can look up stuff before you watch it and it'll tell you. So I'm going to start with, and then the name of the main character is Sing Donavelli, and that becomes important later. So I'll start with chapter 7. The Felix was born a ball of light, a soft, twittering, warm thing who saw her own joy reflected in the eyes of her mother. They tumbled and skidded about the sky, and for the briefest of times, all was perfect. She wasn't to know that her happiness set the universe listing and something had to be done to put it right again. So came her brother, mangy and slick, with a film of blood over his eyes, lashing and snapping. He ripped his way into the universe, took his first fortifying gasp, and set upon their mother like a demon. The Felix, older and stronger, lashed back as her mother's eyes grew dull and empty. The cubs fought and tore and leapt, their cries audible even at the bottom of the oceans. Soon the Felix was alone and might have been happy again, even in mourning with the memories of her mother and the beauty of the stars. But in taking the life of her nameless brother, she had broken her own heart. She was now darkness. That day, the Felix came to Earth, and she has been wandering ever since. Little remains of her now, except hunger and ferocity. Skipping ahead to, whoops. I can be loud. That was actually, whoops. Bring on. Hello. Hello. Good evening. That was actually right at the end of that chapter, so that's, you know. Skipping ahead to chapter 11. The Felix clenched her front paws, pearly claws digging into the bark of the tree limb high above the snow. Darkness, she knew. She remembered it. In the sky, the galaxy glittered. But when she chased the lights, the emptiness between them seemed endless. This never bothered her when she was all sky and no cat, more room to romp and spiral and throw her own sparks into the void. But this new darkness was different. Close, trees and little creatures and air pressed in on her, cutting her mind off from the stars. Sometimes she didn't remember the sky at all. She wasn't sure how the cat form came into existence. Before she came to Earth, there had been something cat-like about her, but that vaporous felinity was different from the reality of clinging to this black branch in the freezing night. And the reality of hunger. She might have retained more of her sky mind if her cat hunger hadn't grounded her so solidly in this new, tiny world. She had understood want, even need, but it was the urgency of physical hunger that first trapped her in this cat body. Fortunately, her new form had known what to do. Her first kill was a tom turkey, hurrying through the woods with his family. A few loping pads, a lunge, a snap of the neck, the earthy, sweet scent of feathers, and her teeth clamped down onto satisfying warmth. The turkey had not expected her to chase him into the air. She had hunted many times since then, no fear, no hesitation. She had come to look forward to each kill, so tactile and messy, so different from the death of her brother. His blood had splattered the heavens with glitter. His soul had exploded. The creatures of this place died quietly and easily. Even so, the Felix could never quite kill enough of them. Now in her old tree, she listened to crunching snow. Her ears twitched. Over the generations, the songbirds and small creatures of this forest had learned they usually weren't enough for her to bother with, and the larger creatures had become timid and scarce. What sort of animal would stagger around so noisily after sunset? The Felix's tail swished. A dark shape moved beneath her branch, making its way laboriously through the snow. The creature wasn't looking up. She could have dropped onto its shoulders and killed it with her jaws before it knew she was there. But she was surprised to recognize the creature as human. She had watched humans from the sky, she remembered. They were sometimes interesting. And she had known nothing but waiting and devouring for so long. The Felix jumped from the branch and landed in front of the man, her massive body crushing the hard crust on the night snow. She watched him gasp, freeze, and turn from her before realizing running was pointless. Then he turned back. That was slightly interesting. Most creatures ran. I have never seen anything like you, the man said, shaking. The Felix took a step toward him and he covered his face with his forearms. You look like a cat, but you are not a cat. This was something the Felix had heard from many creatures in their own languages. The man continued to speak. I have come here because I am ill. She could smell the decay on him already. Hunters say a great, terrible beast guards this forest. He lowered his arms. But I have built a church. I believe we can bring goodness here. And I wanted to tell you before I die. The man stood still shaking with cold or fear. The Felix took another step closer and looked into his eyes. She bristled in surprise. There was the brilliant galaxy she had missed for so long. In this man's eyes, she saw the boundless swirling reaches of his soul. She saw his pain and disease, his hope, his uncertainty. A sleeping part of her mind stirred from where it lay, curled around her memories of home. For a moment, she was mesmerized. Then it passed. She tore out his throat. And last, chapter 15. The Felix, when she remembered space at all, remembered it as unforgiving. Everything about space was relentless, the emptiness, the brightness, the coldness, the silence, but the mountain was different. It could be treacherous one moment and a sanctuary the next. That rainy summer, the forest was slick and muddy. The Felix spent most of her time in a shallow cave near the summit, staring out at the gray days. Her thoughts, when they came, were simple. Noticing the color of a mushroom, smelling new leaves, wondering if the rustle in the bushes below was something big enough to bother eating. The concepts of brother, mother, and home were all but lost to her now, but her despair remained, chaining her to the earth. A pack of wolves adopted most of the mountain as their territory, and the Felix anticipated their infrequent passing with interest. It was a large pack, even after she had eaten 2 or 3 of them, and the way they hunted together fascinated her. One wet morning, she was watching them lying in the shelter of branches below the cave. Large rocks and vegetation hid her bluff, but through the leaves she could see the long gray bodies among the stones. They had chosen to rest in this rocky depression, comfort outweighing the difficulty their slender legs must have had scrambling down. A cub was playing, climbing over and around the rocks at the bottom of the bluff, snapping at insects. Every now and then, when he scrambled too far, one of the adults would bring him back with a sound or a tug. At last, the cub managed to scale a small boulder under the lip of the ledge where the Felix sat watching. He swatted some glistening grass blades poking up through a crack in the stone, tangling a clump in his paws and rolling onto his back with it. One of the wolves at the base of the cliff called to him too high. but the cub's nose quivered in the air. He had caught the Felix's scent and didn't know what it was. Eyes bright, he began pawing the loose rock of the cliff, searching for a way up. Too high, came the call from below. Too far, come back. The Felix did not know delight, so couldn't delight in the prospect of so easy a kill. She didn't know fear or uncertainty, so she felt no relief that her next meal was presenting itself in her own lair. But she disliked padding around the forest when it was wet and gray, and she understood convenience. Her ears twitched and her muscles tensed in anticipation of the cub's final leap onto the ledge. The wolf cub continued to claw at the cliff face, dislodging stones and rubble. One of the adults began to clamber up the large boulder. The rain intensified, sending the occasional cascade of muddy water down the cliff. The cub pawed and scraped, scrabbling at last onto a high vantage point just below the ledge. With a final push from his short back legs, he propelled himself over the side and tumbled into a furry ball before the jaws of the Felix. The ground shuddered. This bought the cub a few more seconds of life as the Felix, puzzled, closed her mouth before her jaws could finish their deadly snap. The shuddering intensified, and she and the cub and the lip of the ledge slid down the face of the cliff in muddy confusion. The slippery, tumbling rocks knocked more of their brothers free. Smaller stones, easily influenced by shifting mud, came loose from their perches, leaving larger stones unsupported and teetering. The Felix heard the cub's frantic yelps as he fell. They came to rest in a jumble of stone and dead plants and mud at the bottom of the cliff. Instinctively, the Felix leapt to higher ground, settling on the bank overlooking the depression. Here and there, a tuft of gray fur poked from between rocks, or a long body splattered with mud and blood lay still. Then, to her surprise, she saw the cub pulling himself out of the muck. She hesitated, wondering if such a small meal was worth all that filthy fur. With the mud and debris, the depression was now almost level with the ground above it, and the cub began running across it and back again, edge to edge. He stopped at each patch of gray fur and nosed it twice, 3 times, but all the wolves were dead. Finally, the cub stopped running and sat down in the middle of the clearing. He raised his nose and started to howl. The Felix hopped down and loped over to him. A bigger wolf would have been better. But the cub didn't even try to run. He just stopped howling and looked at her. And in his eyes, she saw whole galaxies, just as she saw in the soul of every creature. But the eyes of this wolf cub were different. My fault, the eyes of this tiny creature said. And the rest of that vast inner universe was wordless, soul-rending grief. An entire cosmos of despair looked back at her. The cat part of her shrank at this. It shouldn't have been given this insight. It didn't know how to react. But at that moment, the part of the Felix that still clung to a memory of the sky expanded within her earth body as though she were breathing in lungfuls of it. That part of her felt this cub's despair as acutely as it felt her own. That part of her understood. Before it curled up and was silent again, the part of her that was sky wept a single tear for this wolf cub. And the sky noticed. The tear hung suspended in the air, solid and shining, until the wolf cub caught it on his tongue like a snowflake. That evening, the Felix watched the wolf pack move on, long legs picking their ways over the rocky terrain, gray coats still shedding sparks of sky magic. The cub stayed close to the adults. And so the first tear the Felix shed was for the wolf cub. The last would be for Sig Donavelli. Thank you.
I'm really glad the wolves were okay. That was beautiful. Thank you. So when Q asked me to do this, he did not say that this would be the last introduction on the last night. So no pressure. It's fine. My name is Sister Allison Regina, and I'm a second semester writing for young people student. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Laura Williams McCaffrey tonight. When I first came to Solstice, I had a lot of questions about whether this program would really be a good fit for me. And all of those questions were laid to rest 5 minutes into my first workshop with Laura. It was immediately obvious to me that she knew the craft of storytelling. And not only did she know that, but she knew how to share that knowledge with others as a teacher. And that is a wonderful gift. Laura Williams McCaffrey has written 3 speculative fiction novels for middle grade and young adult readers published by Clarion Books. She is the author of numerous short stories that have been published in Pink Panther Magazine, Cicada Magazine, Soundings Review, and many others. Her works have been nominated for and won many awards over the years, including the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Magazine Merit Award for Fiction, and being selected as a notable book by the International Reading Association. And she was named a finalist for the Catherine Patterson Prize for Young Adult and Children's Writing in 2015. Besides being a faculty member at Solstice, Laura has also taught at Champlain College in Burlington, Vermont, Potcham School and Homeschool Center in Montpelier, Vermont, and at the Writers in Paradise retreat hosted by Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, Florida. This fall, she is going to begin teaching high school humanities and English language arts at Cabot School in Cabot, Vermont, where she's already been getting to know the students through co-teaching a poetry class there. She recently assisted the students in pioneering a poetry trail through the nearby forest, where hikers can read or listen to poems written by the students, as well as one penned by Laura herself. It has been such a delight having Laura as my mentor this past semester. Besides giving helpful insights into my manuscript and a plethora of book recommendations, she's also given me tips on museums to visit, advice on how to keep a bat house, which apparently isn't all that different from a birdhouse, and lots of ideas on how to improve as a writer. And it's been just wonderful getting to know you, Laura. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Laura Williams McCaffrey.
So sweet. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to work with you as well.
Yeah.
I think it's okay. Yeah, I'm okay. You can hear me. I'm also really impressed that you correctly pronounced Potcham and Cabot, which for those of you who have been to Vermont, there are many names that are anglicized. They're actually French words, and Cabot is one of those words, one of those names. Thank you all. Such a treat to read and very intimidating after both Josh and Abby. And thank you to Quentin and Noah and Temple and Meg. We have a story about the year we ended up on Schedule F. And this does feel like it's maybe rivaling that year. So usually I read something speculative and it's often children's and young adult, but this is neither of those. I sometimes write short stories that are based, that are realistic fiction based where I live. And this is the beginning of one of those short stories, just the first 2 sections of it. I mean, yeah, beginning of a short story, the first 2 sections of that story. It's called Neighborly. Winter. Elaine stopped her car by the large maple at the end of her driveway, and she looked across the road at the parking spot and the track that ran through the pine woods. She also looked at the banner that was strung between 2 pines and hung over the track. Fuck Biden. 2 vertical hand-painted signs had been nailed to the trees to which the banner was tied. Save America Again. Beneath the banner and between the signs stood 2 kids waiting for the school bus. Though it was 10 degrees Fahrenheit, neither wore winter coats, hats, mittens, or boots. Elaine didn't know the kids' names, only those of the parents, John and Carol LaPearl. The oldest kid was leggy and coltish, maybe 14 or so, a daughter, Carol had once said. The 14-year-old was digging at the frozen ground with her sneaker toe. Elaine knew from her own kids' adolescence that teens often refused to wear anything resembling winter clothes. And honestly, when she was 14 and growing up in Vermont, she'd been the same. Still, the younger kid, a son Carol had told her, couldn't be older than 7 or 8, and so was the age for recess, snow forts, sledding, and snowball fights. Instead of playing in the snowbanks on either side of the track that was the La Pearl's driveway, the little kid stood with hunched shoulders, his hands stuck deep in jacket pockets. The wind blew, and the pines spilled snow and ice on the kids' heads. Both breathed out white clouds, ragged and thin. The icy road was clear of other cars, and Elaine had to drive to work, but she didn't pull out into the road. Instead, she kept watching the kids as the warm air from her car's heating system blew on her. She hadn't really seen the La Pearl's house since the family moved in, though she had seen it in past incarnations. To reach it, you had to walk far down the track, through the woods, and then into a swampy clearing that reminded her of something out of an Edgar Allan Poe story, with large overgrown tangles of pine trees, their branches thick and creaking. Mosses covered the slope behind the house. Below the house was a swampy plateau of muddy water and cattails. 20 years ago, the house had been a hippie cabin, its beams carved to look like tree trunks with vines. Then the hippies had decided to move to Burlington, and the cabin had stood empty a while. Eventually, a young guy had moved in, and many cars started to come and go, parking near the road for a short bit while the drivers hiked into the cabin, stayed a little, hiked out, and drove off. Elaine had suspected the neighbor of selling drugs. He was cheerful enough when she saw him at the mailbox. He said hello and chatted about the weather. He was missing an eye tooth, which made him look piratical. He lived there all summer, and he built an addition, expanding the cabin into a small house. The house then looked unbalanced, the addition a half-story taller than the original cabin and more rectangular than square. One night, the neighbor simply disappeared, and suddenly a woman who worked at the closest gas station lived in the house with her 4 kids. They also disappeared one day, and the town gossip was that the woman had taken cash from the gas station with her. After that, the house stood empty for several years, and when Elaine trespassed to look around, briars, vines, and trees crowded the house, growing in front of the door. A small mudslide in the yard had caused more of the ground to slump into the swampy murk, cattails spreading toward the house. She was reminded of the estate that stood above the tarn and posed the fall of the House of Usher. Then this family moved in. The Fuck Biden banner and the MAGA signs had gone up immediately, along with a sign on one of the next trees along the track. That one had a picture of a silhouette of a gun and read, "This property is protected by Smith & Wesson Security." Elaine was used to such no trespassing signs. She'd seen them in Vermont her whole life. She was also used to neighbors whose politics upset her. Vermont used to have a strong live and let live philosophy, and now that seemed less and less to be true. So Elaine had stayed away from the track that led to the house. However, she had seen Carol La Pearl at the mailbox a few times, and they had briefly said hello and chatted as Elaine studiously avoided looking at the banner or the signs. Carol worked many shifts and long hours at the nursing home. She wasn't at the house much, she had told Elaine. But her husband, John, was because he was on disability. He'd fallen while working on a roof, and his back had never really recovered. Elaine hadn't met John, only seen his truck roaring out of and into the track, its US flag rippling behind it. Elaine had seen the kids in glimpses, like this morning, waiting for the bus. Her car's screen told her that the temperature was now 11 degrees Fahrenheit. Still too cold for anyone without decent gear. The younger kid began to jump up and down, and the older one bent so she looked like a question mark. Their breathing made ragged clouds around their faces. Elaine drove by the kids' school on her way to work, and she could easily give them a ride most days, but she couldn't just ask them. She would have to walk up that track to the house and knock on the door. John was probably the one home. In the periphery of her vision, Elaine saw yellow. The school bus was coming. She didn't want to get stuck behind it. So she put the car in gear, pulled out of her driveway, and drove past the kids, who seemed very small under the huge Buck Biden banner. Spring. It was 9:30 p.m. and a car horn blared and blared from out on the road. Elaine was in her pajamas reading, but couldn't ignore the sound. Though she hadn't heard a crash, what if there'd been an accident and no one had reported it? What if someone was hurt, but the ambulance wasn't on its way? She pulled on her coat and she stuck her bare feet in her boots, which sat in the entryway, though it was technically spring. Even in April, you couldn't be certain that the snow was gone. For good. Walking out the door, she turned on her phone's flashlight so it shined out down her long, dark driveway. The horn blared on and on, like a siren calling out a vast catastrophe. She walked forward, around the curve in the driveway, and straight on, past the cedars, past the poplars that rustled all summer, past her maple. Ahead of her lay the empty road, but off to the left, she could see headlights shining from the neighbor's track. John's truck seemed to be on, but was parked under the Fuck Biden sign, as if it had stopped in anticipation of turning onto the road and then simply stayed. Elaine halted, her flashlight illuminating the road and the truck in front of her. She couldn't see into the truck because of the height of the cab and because of the headlight's glare. It could be, though, that John had suffered a heart attack or something and needed someone to help. She thought of the kids standing at the end of the driveway without coats, waiting to be picked up and brought into the warmth of the bus. She pulled up the keypad on her phone so she could dial 911 if she had to, and she walked across the road. The cab was dark, but the driver's side window was open. She called out, "Hello? Are you all right? John?" No response. She walked carefully closer. "Hello?" There was still no answer, so she raised her phone to shine her flashlight through the window. John was slumped over the steering wheel, lying against the horn, which was still blaring. His eyes were closed, but his mouth was open and he was drooling a little against the steering wheel. "John?" She could smell booze, the scent so strong it wrinkled her nose. "It's Elaine," she said. "I'm from across the road. Are you all right?" John startled, his eyes only opening a little. His eyelids were puffy, and so were his cheeks. His hair stuck up on one side like little kids in the morning. He sniffed. Yeah, he said blearily. "Yeah, I'm going." He was swiping at the side of the steering column like he was trying to find the key. "I don't think that's a good idea," Elaine said. "Did something happen? Are you hurt? Why don't you go back inside?" He ignored her. "Did you take the key?" He squinted. "I can't see anything." "Sorry," she said, lowering the flashlight. He was straightening a little, but wavering in his seat. "You seem pretty tired," she said. "Where are the kids?" "It's a fob, not a key," he laughed, his eyes still half closed. "I'm fine." She turned and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, she gave the address immediately in a hush. She said, "My neighbor is drunk and maybe something happened to him, like a stroke. He won't get out of the car. He wants to drive." "It's on," John said, though Elaine didn't hear the engine. The dispatcher was talking in her ear, but she couldn't take in what the dispatcher was saying because a car was coming in their direction and the headlights shone on her standing there in pajamas, a coat and boots, talking on her phone. The car pulled over near where the La Pearls usually parked, and a person got out. As the person walked toward Elaine into the truck's headlights, Elaine saw it was Carol, who wore blue scrubs and clogs, her hair in a messy twist. Carol called, "What's going on?" John shouted, "Carol, hey, Carol, let's go to Italiano's." The expression on Carol's face in the headlights reminded Elaine of famous pictures from the Great Depression. What was the word? Haggard, strong, determined, all of these. The dispatcher was still talking. Elaine interrupted the dispatcher saying, I think his wife just arrived. Elaine called out to Carol, "He wants to drive off. It doesn't seem like he should." "John," said Carol, and then she said to Elaine, "Thanks, I'll take care of it." She sounded tired, like this was just one more problem and the usual kind. I called 911, Elaine said more quietly, so Carol would hear, but not John. I didn't want him turning onto the road. Why did you do that? Carol asked, and her voice raised. Are the cops coming? Fuck the cops, said John. I don't know, Elaine said. She held up her phone. I'm still talking to the dispatcher. I'm taking care of it. Tell them I'm taking care of it. This felt like a lie, and Elaine didn't know what to say. Carol held out a hand the way you might reach for help, but instead Elaine realized she wanted the phone. Let me talk to them. Elaine felt her hand extending, and she gave her phone to Carol, who immediately started talking the way one does in the grocery store when your kids are having a tantrum, or at a restaurant when your spouse starts shouting. Her voice was soft and a little broken. Then Carol hung up, and she gave Elaine back her phone. Thank you, she said, but Elaine wasn't sure what she was thanking her for, calling emergency services or not insisting emergency services or the cops or somebody come. Nothing Elaine had done seemed at all helpful or in any way to have fixed the situation. Then Carol turned to the truck cab and leaned in through the window. She spoke in a low, soothing voice. John kept swearing and then started slurring so badly that Elaine couldn't tell what he was saying. The truck headlights turned off. Carol said to her, "We're all right. Thanks." The door to the truck opened and John almost fell out. Carol put one of his arms over her shoulders, supporting him as he got his legs under him. Elaine took a step toward them. I could help. Ooh. Carol said in the fake voice one uses when trying to get rid of solicitors or sales clerks, "No, we're good. Thanks. Thanks." Elaine hesitated. Then she said, "Let me know if you need anything." She turned her back on them, feeling the night's chill. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura Williams McCaffrey, Audie Rule, Josh Neufeld. Can we have one more round?